Climate change caused by fossil fuels is a hoax, and I have a simple way to explain why. Carbon dioxide makes up only 0.04 of all gases in our atmosphere. Of that 0.04, 96 of it is natural, so 4 is man-made. So the total amount of CO2 in Earth's atmosphere that comes from the burning of fossil fuels equates to roughly 0.0016. To illustrate how insignificant that amount is, imagine filling a bath to the brim 180 ltrs with water at an ambient temp of 15 degrees Celsius, Earth's ambient temp. Now fill a thimble around 3 mls with boiling hot water and tip it into the bath. How much do you think that would increase the 15 degrees C temperature by? And that's when adding a boiling hot amount at 0.0016 the overall volume. Whereas CO2 traps solar radiation at much lower temperatures than that. It's nonsense to say that humans have any effect on the planet's temperature. But even more ridiculous is the idea that Western countries could make any significant impact by reducing emissions by the rates that even the biggest climate change grifters are demanding. History will look back on these carbon reduction measures, which basically result in a tax on the poor, as one of the biggest crimes on the human race. This analogy is simply to help demonstrate the tiny amounts of volume that the entire human population add to the atmosphere each year. The climate change simps here are losing their minds over how that's not how the physics work. This is a flawed model. But it's not supposed to be that in the first place. The point is, the impact we have is tiny. And the reductions that are even slightly achievable even with the most draconic measures, because net zero is moronic and impossible, will not make any difference. Carbon taxes affect the poor mainly and only help to widen the gap between them and the rich. London is not going to be underwater in 20 years. The ice caps are not going to melt. Some are calling me a shill for the oil industry. But these climate change simps are either at best brainwashed into panic, or at worst, are shills for the green agenda, which has become the biggest growth industry in recent years. Finally, to those saying that the scientists are all in agreement about man-made climate change. Firstly, that's not true. And secondly, if you went by that metric, I'm guessing that you probably went along with the COVID nonsense and got your clot shot. In which case, I'm not sure why you are worried about climate change. Because you are probably not going to make it past the next few years anyway. Peace. What do you think is the cause, and is this your area of expertise? Genuine questions. Nice try. ExxonMobil. Serious though. Dumbest post I've seen on here. As a counterpoint to your well-constructed argument, the average human weighs 70 kilograms if the average human consumes 100 micrograms of LSD, which is 0.000143 of their mass. Do you think it's apt to have any effect? Some things don't behave in an intuitive or linear manner. Greenhouse gases are one of those things. Op tells me he doesn't understand physics without telling me he doesn't understand physics. Beyond that, why would a bunch of scientists making 5 figures lie about this shit for decades versus a bunch of oil barons who are billionaires lying about it for decades? Even if you can't digest the science, use your head. Or what's left of it. Contact scientific journals worldwide and publish these explosive findings. The world deserves to know. I have a client who's the chief engineer of alternative energy for a large oil company. He told me passenger cars are one of the least contributors to CO2. He said planes and semi-trucks are the main contributors, as so much freight is hauled through those means and there is constant import-export going on in the world. Passenger vehicles are the least bit problem. It's not a good analogy because it doesn't really capture the actual physics involved. Do you get a new Ultima if you make it to 150 upvotes? I see the big oil simps have come out in droves. In my country of residence, UK, I rarely get the chance to build a proper snowman during winter time compared to 40 years ago. Your bath example doesn't really work in this case, because the heat doesn't get trapped inside and bounces back and forth like it does on Earth. You think every process is linear, i.e. output is simply proportional to input. But it's not for chemical systems and fluid dynamics. You should learn about chaos theory. Google butterfly effect. Now, instead of boiling water, imagine it's some homeless crackhead's spit, piss, spit, sweat, toenail clippings, whatever going into your bath. You still gonna want to get in. That is not a good example. The heat source would need to be a consent. You have an example that does not prove what you are claiming. If you do a quick Google search, you can see carbon dioxide experiments that prove that the increase of CO2 does raise the temperature when the heat source is a heat lamp. Buddy, have you ever seen smog in big cities? Do you honestly think that isn't impacting the environment? In your example, you're treating the CO2 as it is the heat, but the theory is that CO2 is an insulator for solar radiation. So picture that tank of water inside a greenhouse absorbing the sun's rays. The wonders of the interwebs. Giving a voice platform to people who have absolutely no idea what are they talking about. The little people use analogies from their very limited reality. I guess you know better than hundreds of scientists and countless hours of experiments and research. Why worry about global warming? We can block the sun with our fingers. 200 years of climate data for a planet 4.5 billion years old. We don't know shit. Anyone telling you different is a liar. Regardless of what anyone thinks, the climate is changing and it's pretty much out of our control. And always has been. I don't know what to believe about climate change, but I do want and wish for those floating islands of human garbage not to exist anymore, and the overconsumption of plastic is so devastating and harmful for our hormones and environment. Plants love it. Just saying, why then do people buy tanks of it and grow supreme buds by adding CO2? Yeah, we're polluting the planet, but it's gonna do what it's doing no matter how many bottles people recycle or electric cars save the world. It's been hotter before, despite what TV says. It's definitely the era of wild weather and not much can be done about it. If you think of a tank of water filling with 100 liters per minute, the tank is also drained 100 liters per minute. If humans then add 3 liters per minute, is the human's contribution of only 3 not harmful? When it was in equilibrium before humans started adding water. Where do you get your data from? Fossil fuel propaganda. Put more simply, the government said it, so it's not true.